Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, death slicers, passes, vassals. I'm a useful idiot, and today I want to talk about this breaking story about the IRS apologizing for targeting conservative campaign groups during the 2012 election cycle. And the background story on this obviously goes back into last year, and a number of conservative groups felt like they were being targeted and complained and filed complaints. Well, now we get an official apology. And all the details that came out about this now sound like a broken record of how exposure of these sort of things happens. We get the same old thing. For example, now we have low-level workers in Cincinnati apparently were the culprits in this, which is pretty ludicrous. But that's what they always do, talk about just ineptitude and point out some low-level fall guys and whatnot. So, but as it turns out, they were targeting groups for extra review when they applied for tax-exempt status during the election campaign. And overall, 3,400 groups were started during that election cycle, and 300 of them were targeted. And the criteria that these supposed low-level workers in Cincinnati used were Tea Party and Patriot. Those are the two words they used to trigger whether they were going to give somebody a hard time, and also, more importantly, request lists of donors. And the IRS is saying that it wasn't politically motivated, but clearly it was very politically motivated. You're going to target 300 groups, and they have the words Tea Party and Patriot in there. And against IRS's own rules, they requested lists of donors, and not only that, they wanted background on these donors, group members' political activities, their social networking, what sort of comments they posted, and family members. So, so this is about as politically motivated as you get. And when you look at the fact that they were targeted by using the word Tea Party and Patriot, this brings a couple things to mind. Well, first of all, is the fact that the government could use the entire apparatus of the government at that time, the administration, but everything, including the IRS and the FBI and whatever else, is part of a vast campaign machinery. That's rather unfortunate that our entire government is part of a re-election campaign. But I don't want to focus on necessarily the re-election campaign and the abuse of the Obama administration and Democrats necessarily in targeting these groups called Tea Party or Patriot, because let's be realistic, the status quo Republicans, those who are in favor of the likes of Mitt Romney and a lot of status quo GOP that we have in Congress right now, they have just as much interest in targeting and in marginalizing and eliminating groups, political campaign groups, last election that have the word Tea Party and Patriot in them. And just as a side note, what a sad commentary in this day and age that to live in America and call yourself a patriot makes you suspicious of being involved in domestic terrorism. So what a sad day there. But anyway, I digress. So anyway, the justification the IRS gave was whether these groups were violating their tax-exempt status. Well, if they want to see groups that are violating their tax-exempt status, they should be looking at churches and all these super PACs. Sure you'll find just as many violations there. But I want to go off on 3 points about this that are bigger than just democratic abuse of the IRS to target conservative groups. Because, as I say, first of all, I think both parties have just as much interest in targeting these groups. And I would suggest that this is an old tradition. So this is nothing new. The IRS has always been used for this in the last 100 years. And we can also pretty much guess that other parts of the government are also being used for the same things. There's a lot of data out there, and a lot of data that people want, certainly during election cycles. For example, the Republicans, perhaps they wanted to get the lists of groups that were Tea Party or Patriot or Tea Party related to either marginalize marginalize them or co-opt them. Those are the two tactics. So they probably wanted to find out who all the donors were so they could get them on board with the status quo GOP. So anyway, so this is not generally a partisan issue in the way people might be thinking. And then, like I say, the other second issue would be the vast campaign machinery, the fact that everything in our government can be utilized, particularly for a sitting president. All the apparatus that is available to him, including Air Force One, etc. And but that brings me to my third point, and this is where it gets interesting, and that's the fact that if the government and political partisan forces in our government have access to using the IRS in this manner, they certainly have access to using all the other apparatus of the U.S. government, including the FBI and CIA and surveillance and law enforcement. And I've brought this up in other videos, and it probably makes a lot more sense now when we see that the IRS can be used for political means, and that's the fact that who's going to keep the political mucky mucks, the ones at the top, the people in Congress, the senators, the campaign people, the Karl Roves, all these type of people. What's to keep them from having access to information that can be gotten from the FBI and law enforcement and Department of Homeland Security and all their data mining and all their surveillance and all their cameras and all their internet gathering, email gathering, telephone listening? What's really to stop the political machinery from having access to that and using it to dig up these scandals and looking for dirt, and they're not that hard to find. So anyway, certainly a famous example of that is J. Edgar Hoover, who had kept dossiers on all sorts of major political figures in order to be prepared to blackmail them if necessary for his chosen administrations and whoever his pals were in the government. So this is a time-honored tradition, and there's no reason why that would not be true. So there you have it. Good job, Internal Revenue Service. Nice to know that some of our taxes are going to pay for you to do politically motivated targeting for a sitting administration and for cronies on both sides of the aisle. And here we have a vast permanent campaign apparatus. We have every aspect of the government open for partisan methodologies, and we have the potential for all the surveillance and everything to be part of this. So, wow, there you have it. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.